Good evening. Welcome to the overnight edition of From Day One. Art Bell is ready with a trip in time. Back to Dark Matter, October 2nd, 2013. Let's begin.
Radio, everybody. I am Art Bell. It's a pleasure to be here on Sirius XM particularly. Well, I'll tell you what. These folks have done exactly what they have said they would do all the way down the line. The stereo is now summed up. So those of you who were astute enough to send me emails about the stereo situation, congratulations. You got it dead right. That's why you have to pay attention to emails that come from all of you. Speaking of that, if you want to send one on artbell@artbell.com. I want to lead tonight with sad news. I'm sure you know by now Tom Clancy has passed away at just 66 years of age. 2 years younger than I am. Read every one of his books. He's an American icon. He'll certainly be very much missed. Red October, and for Red October, was just awesome. So, take care, Tom. See you on the other side. Working on the 90-minute timeout. Yes, I know that annoys many people. Well, you've got to remember, it really is important to remember, that Sirius XM sort of began more as a music service than it did as anything else. And then it began to add a little bit of talk radio, and this is really, I think, its first foray. Well, there's Howard. But I mean, really, long-form talk radio, and particularly, certainly, paranormal talk radio, this is their first foray into it. So, learn as you go. Okay, I want to remind you about ghost stories. If you have a very good ghost story, just encapsulated, very short story with your phone number and perhaps on Spooky Matter, that'd be Halloween. Spooky Matter. Good name. Thank you, Bellgap. That's a site where they talk about this program. Bellgap. Bellgap. You might want to take a look. As I said last night, they're pretty cruel in terms of being critics, but vaguely lovable. Now, there's another meteor. I'm beginning to think that somebody out there is throwing rocks at us. This one went screaming over Alberta, but this time, it was captured on video. So you might want to take a look. It's the age of the meteor. What can I say? They're coming one after another after another. I've been doing reports every single night on meteors. And there's a picture on the website, artbell.com. There's going to be a lot of reasons for you to go to artbell.com tonight. A picture of some weather that the writer thought represented some sort of weather modification. It certainly represents a very, very weird picture of weather. I don't know what you call that, coming in on Montana. I've got to take a second and tell you about the funniest thing that I think I've been a cat owner all my life, as you know. Still have 3. Dolly, Abby, Yeti. And I mentioned Dolly first because she's the one who gets the credit for this story. I sleep like I think anybody else. We've got a king-size bed. My wife and I are together side by side. But this morning at about 6 o'clock, something, and I get to bed late program. Something woke me up. Kelly is our little adoptee from the Philippines. We got her in Manila. And she's a little kitty. A little Filipino kitty. And she's always going to be small. But she's a darling. Anyway, this morning at about 6 in the morning, I woke up because I heard a... I can't make... my voice won't go high enough to imitate her voice. Half asleep. So I turned over, and between my wife and myself, there's a little room between the 2 pillows. you've got to picture this. I don't know how she did it, but she's very human. You know, she opens drawers. She does a lot of things that she probably ought not be doing. But here she is, next to me, in the little space between my pillow and my wife's, with her head up. In other words, she's sleeping on her back. And I swear to God, folks, this is the truth, every word of it. She's got the covers going around her little neck, and her head is facing up, as in sleeping on her back. How she got under there, managed to cover herself up, and then stick her head out so she was imitating us, I don't know. But there she was, and she was there all night long. I guess I woke up at 6, and he was kind of snoring and dreaming. I think it was a dream. You know, cats have dreams, and sometimes they're moving around or making a little noise, and I guess she had a dream. But it was hilarious. If I could have had a picture of it, it would have been the $1 million picture of the year. So I can only describe it to you, but it was hilarious, absolutely hilarious, to turn over and see a cat on its back, covered up to its neck, and snoring somewhat peacefully. I swear to you it's true. Anyway, all right, now on to the real reason for you to go to artbell.com. We have had so many emails, so many communications from people saying, Art, what about dark matter stuff? You know, t-shirts, coffee cups. Dark matter's a, cool thing to have printed on whatever. And we've been getting those now since the show began. So, okay, we've got them now. We now have a store on the website. Arts Parts. Bad name, huh? Arts Parts. And in Arts Parts, you can choose from t-shirts, coffee mugs, hats, that kind of stuff. And it's the only official, that we live in the day and age of piracy. I mean, big piracy. I have no illusions about it. TV shows are pirated, movies are pirated, my program is pirated, everything's pirated. Just the age we live in. And so, there's people out there pirating my image and the name of the show and selling stuff. Well, let me tell you, it's not the real stuff. Now, how will you know that what you get is the real thing? Well, I have signed it. That's how you'll know. If you see a supposed Arts Parts item, and it doesn't have my signature on it, that means it's bootleg stuff. It also means that if they've copied my signature, they're going to have legal cement shoes shortly. So there you have it. If you want to go to artbell.com, those of you who have been asking about it, we have quite an assortment of cool stuff. Hang up. Wait, I'm not done. Am I? Government's still closed. NASA's testing cell phone tracking. Oh, wonderful. NSA, rather, is testing cell phone tracking. Probably with help of NASA. Here's somebody, a subscriber from the United Kingdom, says, Art, it was a little tricky to become one here in the UK, but I did it. As you said, I need a U.S. address and U.S. credit card. So congratulations and hi over there. And let's see. Oh, yes. This is somebody who writes about Whitley's statement of if you die. I'm going to be asking our guest tonight about this. This goes way back to John Lear days, who quoted, he said, Whitley Strieber, and that is, if you die, the traditional thing is you go to the light, right? There's a bright, shiny light. Your relatives are supposed to be there along with friends who've passed away. And probably Tom Clancy to say, welcome. So you go to the light. But no, I've been told otherwise by some wise people. John Lear and Whitley confirmed it last night. Don't go to the light, they say. Go to the darkness. The light is a more than that. I still think if I were to pass on right now and I saw the light and I saw the darkness, I'd be going to the light. But according to some knowledgeable people, I would be tricked and I'd walk right into, I suppose, the flames. Whatever was waiting. So, doesn't that bug you? Did you hear that? People saying it's a trick. Don't go to the light, go to the darkness. See, now I put it on you. You'll always think about it now. Military magazine highlights Iranian Air Force encounters with UFOs. Combat aircraft monthly makes a startling claim. F-14s from the Islamic Republic of the Iran Air Force have been chasing something for 20 years. Now, when I first read this, I thought, sure, drones, ours. But no. Mysterious unidentified craft displayed astonishing flight characteristics, including, for example, the ability to fly outside the atmosphere, attain a maximum cruise speed of Mach 10 and a minimum speed of 0, with the ability to hover over any target they want. Now, if we have drones like that, maybe we do. I mean, who knows? Maybe we do. All right, well, I'm going to halt it all there. Art's Parts up at artbell.com. Take a look. Pick out what you like. Los Angeles Times best-selling author, paranormal researcher, and former engineer scientist, get this, on the International Space Station, Dr. Albert Taylor, has been involved in numerous top-secret programs, one of which is the F-117A stealth fighter. He was also the design team, on the design team of the former President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, or Star Wars. We can ask him lots of questions, huh? Taylor is currently an internationally known lecturer, speaker, and paranormal researcher, robot design builder, and programmer. He's an active supporter of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, so we'll ask him about this going to the darkness thing, and the well-respected Monroe Institute. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a very interesting night. What I suggest is that you stay right where you are and prepare yourself for, how dare I say it, quite a ride. Yes, we're going to pull it all sky high. This is Dark Matter. I'm Art Bell, and we're going to rage through the night time. Stay right where you are. Dr. Albert Taylor, author, by the way, even though he's going to talk about robots tonight, but because of the fact that there are so many new listeners, after all, when we started here, yes, I know a lot of you came over, and, my regular listeners, you understand, you came over, but bear in mind, SiriusXM has about 27 million subscribers. That's a whole bunch of people. 27 million people. Come on. That really is a lot of people. And, they're kind of stumbling into and discovering the show. A lot of people have XM, Sirius in their cars. And, you're on a long trip and you're going, my God, this is a lot of channels. How many are here anyway? A couple hundred, I think, 200. That's a lot of channels. So they're slowly stumbling into dark matter. We're here for, a total of 8 hours, I think, every night. That's a lot of time, really a lot of time. Anyway, new listeners. So, Dr. Taylor originally wrote a book called Soul Traveler. Dr. Taylor, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Inviting me back. It's an awesome experience again.
Well, it is awesome, and for a lot of listeners, as I just mentioned, it's going to be a new experience. So we're going to get to robots and paranormal, but you wrote a book called Soul Traveler.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, it was, still is, revolutionary, I would say.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. And so give us a sense, if you would, as if you were talking to a brand new person who had never seen your book, never heard of soul travel, doesn't have the slightest clue what soul traveling is. Give us the 101, please.
Well, first, let me say this. I just stopped laughing because I was thinking, why doesn't it surprise me that you'd have a cat named Yeti? So I just wanted to mention that was kind of...
22 years old, Albert. 22 years old.
I'm a cat lover, too. I almost named my cat Astro, but I thought not. Maybe not. That would maybe be a good idea.
Yeah,
well,
I'm sorry. We have a little pause, so it's important every now and then to pause, or we won't hear each other. That guy you mentioned is 22 years old now.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's a senior citizen. Well, I love cats, so I really do.
Okay, anyway, so your book, Soul Traveler, if you're going to give somebody an idea, just as you would from the beginning, what would you say? What's soul travel?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I can say that I never set out to write a book. I was keeping a diary. A journal, basically. As far back as I can remember, the age of 5 is my earliest memories of having some strange things happen to me in my life and being terrified of them all my life. And the superstition that my family used to infuse into that experience didn't help any. And the thing that used to happen to me all the time was that I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would feel paralyzed and I couldn't move, but I could see and I could hear. And then the really scary parts are sometimes there would be something humanoid, transparent, shadowy moving around my room. So at 5 years old, my grandmother lived with us at that time. So at 5 years old, when I'd finally be able to move my body, which was a horrible experience, I would jump out of my bed and I would go running into her room. And I would say, Grandma, I couldn't move and I was paralyzed and there was someone in my room. And my grandmother would pat me on the back and say, oh, that's all right. What that was a witch was coming to steal your soul because you were bad yesterday. So that was my introduction to what's now known as out-of-body experiences. So with that kind of beginning, I wasn't eager to embrace this at all. As a matter of fact, I was terrified of it. And there is a lot of people over the years, and particularly in my family, that are terrified of this, and they still have this experience. And those people who are out there who do have this experience, if you don't know what it is very frightening. You know,
all
so
right. Here is a first big question for you. Mm-hmm. People are probably sitting there going, oh, come on, out of body. Can you really verifiably leave your body either during sleep or during a session that you cook up with some level of concentration or however you would do it? Can you really, really, really leave your body? Is it for real or is it, well, I don't know what's the right word. Not real.
Well, is it real or is it a dream or is it a figment of my imagination? Is it a neurological defect? Well, this is what I have to say this. I was raised Catholic. I didn't believe in this stuff. I wasn't taught anything about this stuff. The closest thing to anything astral that I knew of was Astro, the dog on the Jetsons. So being a scientist in aerospace and being in the military with a secret clearance for almost 3 decades, this didn't even come into my frame of reference or belief in any way, shape, or form. But I couldn't ignore the fact that I've been having these neurological or paralysis episodes and the voices, and then another thing that I didn't know is that I was having a lot of flying dreams, and I would be flying in my dreams all the time, and not just flying, but in control of my dreams. In other words, having lucid dreams. But I never knew any of that was connected. And then later on, I had the fortune of attending a lecture of a woman who had a near-death experience. And she was the first person, she said to everybody, she says, has anybody ever felt paralyzed? And that was the first time that anybody outside of my family had ever even talked about it. And my hand immediately shot up in the air, and I said, yeah, it happens to me all the time. And she was the very first person that said to me, you may be on the verge of having out-of-body experiences. And I looked at her and I laughed because I didn't believe in any of that stuff. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm really having this, it would be easy for me to check, because at that particular time, the experiences had gone from happening maybe once a week to sometimes 3 times a night. So it wasn't, I didn't have to, that's why it got my attention, and that's why I started investigating it. And I have to admit, I didn't go to psychics and palm readers and all that to investigate it first. I went to a neurologist, and I was looking for a physical abnormality or genetic abnormality that was causing this. I wasn't looking for anything hocus pocus or magical or anything like that. So, going to her when she said that, the first thing I did is that night, and it was amazing. I kept a journal, and my journal eventually became my book. That night, I decided I was going to conduct maybe 10 or 20 different experiments throughout the week, and write it down and see if I could make some sense of it. And she said to me something that began to change everything. She said, if you do have one of these experiences, she said, think about coming to see me. And I thought, okay, I will think about that. So I remember I'd flown so many times, but I'd never gone from a waking state, laying down and meditating, to actually leaving the body that I could remember and ending up in a flying situation. But in that particular night, what I did is I laid down, and I began to, because I'd been practicing, trying to duplicate what had happened to me before, I realized that it happened when I was very relaxed, when my breathing was very deep and steady, and I began to imitate that. Little did I know I was developing some type of launching technique at that time. So I began to do that, and what happened was I began to feel as if my body or the bed was vibrating. And because I live in Southern California, that's not something so abnormal. I immediately, my fail-safe is I look at this little tassel that hangs from my ceiling fan, that when there's an earthquake, it's like my little Richter scale. And I can judge the level, but it wasn't moving. And I thought, okay. And then I thought, well, let me turn over. And I tried to turn over, and I couldn't move. This was the very first time I'd gone from waking state to actually the paralysis state. And then I thought, and then without me even thinking about it, all of a sudden it felt like I felt like I had my head against the headboard of my bed. And then it felt like my headboard began to move downward. And I thought, that's a strange feeling. And then I wear glasses, and I knew I hadn't gone to bed with my glasses on. And all of a sudden I could see. And not just see blurry like I normally would until I put my glasses on, but the room was very, very clear, and it had a really strange glow to it. And then I began to hear this sound, like a buzzing sound, like electrical buzzing that went along with the vibration. And it was really, real loud. And so while all this was going on, I began to think about what the woman who had a near-death experience said, and I began to think about her. And this was real strange, too, because this had never happened to me. While I began to think about her, all of a sudden, I felt as if, and this scared me hard at first, it startled me at least, I felt 2 hands grab me and kind of pull me toward the window, and I went through the window, kind of like if you've ever been in a bathtub and you've had a bubble bath, and you stick your finger in through the bubble, and it kind of adheres to your finger. That's kind of how the glass felt going through. And the next thing I knew,
that really is so cool. I mean, I can almost feel it as you say it. I've never done this, but I've been. Well, you've come close. I've only come close. I've never had the kind of thing you're talking about, and you can actually prove this, can't you? In other words, you actually go elsewhere, and you've seen people, messages have transpired, that kind of thing, right?
Well, this was the first night that little bit of evidence or a clue happened, because as I began to move, flying through the air, I suddenly realized this is just like flying that I've been doing all my life, except I never entered it from a waking state before. And it didn't seem like I was in control of the direction I was heading. It seemed like I was being kind of guided. And the one thing I was in control of is flying higher and faster, but I wasn't in control of the direction. And after a little while, I found myself coming down toward a rooftop in a neighborhood I'd never been before. And penetrating the roof. I thought I was going to crash into it, but penetrating the roof, and I could actually see the wiring and insulation in the attic as I was moving down through the roof and eventually into a bedroom. Somebody's
So
bed.
cool. Yeah.
And so I'm standing at the foot of the bed, and I'm thinking, am I dreaming this? And then I notice in the bed was the woman who had the near-death experience who told me to come think about her. Now, none of this to me was proof at all. I could have been dreaming this, and it was wishful thinking, whatever. I paid no attention to this. But I noticed that one of her legs was sticking out of the bed. And on her leg was, it looked like me, to me, a cast, like she had broken her leg. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting thing to remember if I'm really here. And then I noticed that, I knew she was married, but I noticed that she, her and her husband slept in twin beds. And not only was he another person, I assume it was her husband, but he was in the bed, and the bed was way on the other side of the room, which I thought, well, that's kind of strange. You know, I thought, well, maybe they've been married a long time or something.
Is that what happens?
I don't know. It may end up being in the other room. I don't know. But I thought, okay, if I'm really here, then that's another good thing to remember. And then something, I rarely talk about this. And all of a sudden, there was this being, this brilliant, light, humanoid-shaped thing. I didn't know what it was, and it was standing by the head of the bed of the woman. And I have to say, because I'd never seen anything like that, and it was startling, overwhelming, it terrified me. And I thought, all I could think about was, whatever you are, please, I don't want to experience this. And this was interesting.
Albert, just 1 second. I'm going to stop you for 1 second. I think that is where you would lose a lot of people normally. In other words, the soul traveler part, fascinating, even sounds like fun to do, and people are listening. But when you start talking about encountering a being, then you're going to lose some people who are going to say, come on, a being. But once you've embraced one, then why not the other, I guess. Although it adds so much, for me, terror to the story.
Well, that's why I never mention it usually, even though it's in my book. But I don't, because it was something that I still wasn't very comfortable with. But it's been years now since I've been talking about this, so I feel more comfortable sharing it. So, but it terrified me. I wasn't thinking it was an angel or anything. I just knew that it was something that should not have been there and wasn't a person. But the thing about it is, it was almost as if it knew I was afraid, and it shifted to let's say a spectrum or a frequency that I couldn't detect. That's the best way I can describe it. It's almost like turning the dial of a radio off the station. And I had a feeling it was still there, but it wasn't visibly there. So I thought to myself, well, I've had enough of this. I kind of felt like an astral cat burglar kind of thing. I thought, I want to go home. I want to go back. And with that thought, I felt those hands again. And all of a sudden, the scenery it accelerated away from me at this incredible rate of speed. The speed, it was like nothing I've ever experienced. No plane or any type of vehicle I'd ever experienced could go that fast. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was dropped from the ceiling of my bedroom and landed in my bed. And I woke up, and I was vibrating like crazy. And I turned on the light at the end of the bed, and I took my journal out, and I began to write all of this down. Now, up until this point, Art, I can actually say I didn't believe in out-of-body experiences. I didn't believe this experience was real at all, and not even curious if it was real. I just documented the experience, like keeping a dream journal, and that's about it. That was on a Saturday. On Monday, the woman that had the near-death experience was teaching another class, and I decided to go to her class. And I was sitting there in the back of her class, and I couldn't wait for the break because I wanted to ask her, and I said to her at the break, I said, I had an interesting dream this weekend, and I wanted to share it with her. And she said, well, what? I said, I thought that I had this experience like leaving my body, and I asked to see you, like you said, and I found myself in this bedroom, and you were in the bed, and then I looked at her physically, and she didn't have a cast on her leg. And I said, well, but in my dream experience that I had, you had a cast on your leg. And she said, said, well, she said, you know, I sleep with a heating pad on my leg, a white heating pad wrapped around my leg because I have arthritis in my knee. And I thought, coincidence? And then I said, well, you know, I noticed that you and your husband sleep in two different beds, and in my dream, he was way on the other side of the room. And she said, yeah, my husband, so I put him way on the other side of the room because he has sleep apnea, and he snores and stops breathing in the middle of the night, and he keeps me up all night. And I thought to myself, coincidence?
Yeah.
So this is where this doesn't make sense to me because I don't believe in this stuff. But how could I dream that? You know, that didn't make a lot of sense to me, but it did make me very, very curious. So I decided to conduct another experiment the next night. But this time, I practiced the techniques a little bit more, and I said that I ate at the same time I ate the previous day, and I tried to set up everything the way the process that led up to me launching the night before. Same thing happened. I began to feel relaxed, vibration, all that happened, and coming up out of my body, the hands, and all that. This time, this is when I was on the space station program. Now, this is another thing. I'm not going to go around talking and telling people that I'm having paranormal or out-of-body experiences and fly to Johnson Space Center and train astronauts on how to assemble the space station too. I'm not going to do that. You know, I'd had a secret security clearance since I was 18 years old. The first thing I worked on that was classified was the Lockheed U-2 when I was in the military. Now I'd moved through all these government programs and had this clearance. And now I have a top secret clearance, secret gold clearance, and there was no way that I was going to jeopardize 22 decades of my career talking about crazy things.
So I take it then, Albert, at this point, you would have kept all of this information tightly secured in a little journal that you were keeping. You wouldn't have talked to anybody about it. Definitely wouldn't have talked to anybody at work about this.
Exactly. Yeah. Except I did talk to one person at work, but I trusted her for some reason, and that was interesting. She told me, she said, well, if you think that happened, why don't you try to visit me this time? So I thought, okay, it was my friend Kim. So, and I wrote this in my journal too. While I was flying out of my body like the night before, with the hands guiding me, this invisible guide of some sort, person, it dropped me. This is something that's interesting. It dropped me off in front of an apartment building that I'd never been to in a neighborhood. And this is something that that was a puzzle to me then, but I understand now, is I couldn't remember where I was going. And I'll fast forward. The reason for that is because you're not traveling with your organic brain. You have a consciousness that's non-organic, and it doesn't remember trivialities. But that's something I discovered later on. So I sat there and I was struggling, trying to remember what was I trying to do, and then it dawned on me, oh yeah, I was trying to visit my friend Kim. And so when I remembered, all of a sudden I moved to the top floor, I moved through a wall, and I found myself in a dining room the first thing I noticed was there was a chandelier hanging from the dining room, but it was huge. I mean, it was too big for the dining room. It looked like it belonged somewhere else. And I thought, okay, if I'm really here, that's something interesting to remember. And then I moved down the hallway, and I noticed as I began to go down the hallway, and this was another interesting thing, is I wasn't walking, I was kind of sliding. Remember like the old Gumby animated things?
Yes.
It was kind of that kind of, it wasn't walking, it was like sliding, floating, moving kind of thing, except I was in contact with the floor. Wasn't floating above the floor. And I noticed I moved to the last door. The last door on the right-hand side, I remember, at the end, was open. And I moved to the door, and I came to the door, and I noticed that there was two beds in the bedroom, and there was a window in the bedroom that was in a very odd place. It wasn't in the center of the wall like you would think there were two beds on either side. It was way in the corner. And I thought, okay, that's so odd, and that's something interesting to remember. And I moved to the window, and I looked out the window, and half of it I could see an alleyway down below. And I was on the second floor, and half of the window was blocked by a telephone pole. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting thing to remember if I'm really here. So I kind of pushed out the window and was floating above the alleyway, and I was trying to remember, how do I get back home? And I remember,
all right, let me for 1 second stop you. You said, interesting thing to remember, if I'm really here. Now, to me, that says that you had a conscious awareness of the fact that you were in an altered state. Now, for example, when I dream, it's very, very real until I wake up and realize it's a dream. But never in my dream do I think, this is a cool dream, or I'm going to rewrite my dream. In other words, I'm always in that state. You had a conscious awareness of the fact that you were in this altered state, yes?
Well, that's another part of what has been happening to me all my life is I remember when I was 5 years old, I would try to describe it to my mother. I would say, Mom, when I dream, I wake up in my dream, and then I fly, and I do things. And I didn't know how to explain it back then. And as I began to grow up, I realized, I'm having lucid dreams, and I become aware. I know that I went to sleep. I know my body is sleeping somewhere, and this is a dream that I can have fun with. And that I've been doing that all my life, but never thought of it being anything other than just lucid dreaming. So
right, that's a big, big difference. Hold tight. We're going to do a break here, and we'll be right back. Actually, the matter is not that dark at the moment. I think the matter is pretty cool. If you could do this, if you could put yourself in the kind of state that Dr. Taylor is talking about, you could leave your body. You could fly at will. You could tell yourself where you want to go, and you would go there. Distance, no object. You could, I've heard stories, people go to the moon and back. That's right, you always do come safely back. That was one of my big questions in the beginning about all this. Do you always come safely back? And Dr. Taylor, before we go any further, I want to ask you, if I die and I spy to my right, with my little eyes, sounds like my daughter, the light, and I spy to my left the darkness, and I've got to turn in one direction or the other. I've had these people saying, it's a trick, Art, don't go to the light, go to the darkness. Do you have any advice there?
Well, I have two different perspectives. One is my own personal experience, and the other is my almost 2-decade experience in the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And 8 million people in the United States alone have had near-death experiences. And if we just want to look at a numbers game and not belief system, there's only a handful that I know of, and I've looked and read their books, that have had negative experiences. The majority of people, and that's what we're talking about, millions, have had a positive experience. And when they've had these positive experiences, it's been with the light, as they have described it. And these people who have described the light come from all walks of life and all belief systems, and some of them with lack thereof. One of the most amazing near-death experiences, and I met the gentleman, he's a doctor, he's a blind doctor, he's been blind all of his life. But when he had his near-death experience, he could see, and he described seeing the light. So that's on the near-death experience side. Now, on my personal side, part of my experiment was to look into what is this light, because I didn't know, I didn't believe. I was raised Catholic, Catholics don't do that stuff. So I'd say about 7 to 10 days into my experiment, I actually had an amazing encounter with this brilliant, if you want to use any other word, big Zepp light, illumination, white sparkler kind of thing that was blinding and piercing. And it is the one singular experience that I can tell you that changed my life forever. And that's why none of this is like a dream, because I've never had a dream that changed my life forever. What happened was, while I was having this experience, because I asked for it, I said, I want to see the light while I was out of body. I encountered this brilliant, it looked like in the middle of the darkness, there was this sparkler, like the sparklers you have on the 4th of July.
Sure.
Those white sparklers, and shards of it were going off in all directions, and it was brilliant. And I have to say, if I had physical eyes, I would have thought they probably would have been just burned away, because it was that brilliant. And the thing about it, though, is that I could sense that it wasn't just an object. And this is the thing that has never, ever happened in any other experience except for this, is my head, my secrets, everything throughout my entire life was out on the table in front of this for examination, not for judgment, but for examination and reassessment. So
I guess through all this, by the way, we picked up a hum on the phone now. I have no idea why.
Oh, no.
Phone connections are really weird. It's not horrible, but it's there. The light or the darkness, which do you go to? I guess you're saying the light, right?
I wouldn't hesitate. But this is the thing, though. It's light and darkness. If you talk on a physical world, it has to do with photons. We're not talking about photons here. We're talking about a perception that is a talent that our soul has.
Okay, so, I really want to know the light or the darkness. Which do you go to?
The light. I would say the light.
The light. That's all I needed was a light.
I wouldn't hesitate.
All right. You're really certain about that, right?
Yes. Yes, without a doubt.
Now, is it similar in soul traveling experiences and near death?
Well, there's one difference between the near death and just having out of body experiences is that in the near death experience, from everything that has been described to me, because I haven't had one, I'm just a member. Everything that's been described to me is that they are taken or shown or led or told they have to return, that kind of thing. In the out-of-body experience, you go pretty much where you want to go about 80% of the time. And the reason that I say 80 is because it's not 100%, because there are some things that you're led or directed to encounter, but most of the time you choose when you go back, and because it's so much fun, you have to almost fight your way to keep from coming back, but you're drawn back eventually. But it's
okay. I would like to know this. Have you heard of anybody having a negative experience when soul traveling, or near death? Of course, that can be very negative. But soul traveling when you're outside your body. Are you aware of any negative experiences?
Well, yes, mine, my own. But I can say this: it was when I was afraid and fearful in the very beginning, and all that's gone away. But in the beginning, I had a lot of frightful experiences. It was basically because I didn't know that I was in control of the experience. I was a passenger instead of a driver.
Okay. So there is a sort of a little cautionary note here about doing this. In other words, it doesn't always turn out well. But then again, sometimes you have bad dreams too.
There's a learning curve, so to speak. And the learning curve is about yourself. It's about your fears. It's about you. And it's about you discovering that your fears aren't founded. And that is something that through this experience, you begin to feel more confident in. And it's like you and I both are cat lovers, so I always use this analogy. It's like I remember when I first got my kitten, and I brought it home, and it was terrified of the surrounding, and then would go usually hide somewhere, and then come out, later on or several days later. But over a period of time, the cat gets very used to your living room, and it's running all around the house. Now you want to let the cat outside. So now there's this new opening, this new doorway, so to speak. And the cat will go and sniff around the doorway, and you may find it sitting on the porch. But the slightest little bit of noise that happens, the cat's going to come running back in. Well, over a period of time, it's going to be in the bushes, and eventually you're going to be saying, kitty, kitty, and the cat's going to be gone somewhere. Well, that's how you are in the out-of-body experience. In the beginning, because you have all these fears that you've learned through your life that people have shared with you, not knowing that they really weren't founded, you've embraced those fears. And you take those fears into this altered state with you. So they, unfortunately, are capable of manifesting.
All right. Well, if I see something that's got big, red, glowing eyes, trust me, I'm not going to do it again. I'm not looking for that kind of OBE. I want... Whoops.
Oh, man.
What was that?
That was my fault. I leaned on the button. Forgive me.
Okay. No problem.
Yeah, that was my fault.
So, anyway, I don't want to spend the whole show on this. I just kind of wanted to update people. If you're having an experience, folks, like, for example, Albert described, where you're absolutely paralyzed, that's the beginning. If you're having an experience where you feel this intense, I don't know what you call it, buzzing, kind of a buzzing, I would say. This is the beginning. Now, you can you can go from there and have a full OBE and go out of your body. It'll take a little doing, but you can do it. Am I right, Albert?
Yes, Art, but I just don't want to leave this loose end, and because a lot of people are already frightened and terrified of this experience without me even saying anything. And I want to tell them that, yes, in the beginning I was afraid, but over a period of time I wasn't, and because I began to not be afraid, I began to explore this, and years and years later, it's the most wonderful thing that has ever happened to me in my life. And not only me, people that I've talked to and taught how to do this. My mother had frightful experiences all her life, and then her 70s and 80s, she had amazing out-of-body experiences. So I don't want people turned off by this and thinking that it's going to be something horrific and long-term, and it's not. It's going to be something wonderful. And yes, you can learn to leave your body, which I didn't know and didn't believe in, by relaxation. And I didn't know anything about meditation and all these exercises that all these shamans and mystics would do. I didn't know anything about that. All I knew is that it would happen to me normally without me trying. And it happened when I was relaxed. And it happened when my breathing was steady and that type of thing. And that's all I tried to do is duplicate that.
Wow. Well, so you recommend people have courage, and if they're find themselves on the edge, and I've been there many times, they just go ahead and take the plunge and go out of your body. Let yourself go. Yes?
Well, not just because of to have the experience. Because it's like it expands. Let's say the first part of the experience, yes, it's a lot of fun and the exploratory and all that. But the bottom line is you really have to ask yourself, what are you that you can do these kind of things? So it goes beyond that. So it goes beyond just jumping on a roller coaster. What are you that you're capable of leaving a physical body, having encounters with non-physical, flying, doing all this kind of things, and we haven't even talked about having encounters with deceased loved ones.
Well, you're a hero of the soul is what you are, and that soul is capable of being separated from your body.
But not everybody believes in the soul. I mean, I was raised in the Catholic Church where the soul was something you kept in your pocket practically, and once in a while you dropped it and it got dirty and you had to take it to a priest and he cleansed it for you, and you keep it back in your pocket and walk around with it. It wasn't something that you could relate to or understand, at least in my world. But to say you have a soul versus that you are a soul, to me, is profoundly different. And through the out-of-body experience, that's what I found, and that's what a lot of people are finding out, is you don't have a soul, you are a soul. And the thing is if you are a soul, and you've come to this earth to have an earthly human experience, why did you do that? And the out-of-body experience, I really, truly believe that it's one of the most incredible tools that we've been given here to actually find out who and what we really are and why we came to this planet in the first.
And that is where we will leave it for tonight. Come on back tomorrow night for part 2 of the interview with Art Bell on Midnight in the Desert. Until then, please make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Help us get to that goal of 50,000 views. 1,000 subscribers. So Boxy Over Nextdoor sends us those nice rest packages we send to y'all. And Google puts us on the algorithms. Coinbase, Ibotta, and Game.gg, you know the drill on those. I'm not going to bother. And until next time, like, share, and subscribe, be kind to one another, and release the Krakens. As we march along this overnight and every overnight, here from day one. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy your good night's rest.